So this one now, just following my thoughts of Sky Showcase, is an unscripted or improvised sort of rant about Sky Cinema, which is another slightly interesting subject. Let's hope we don't get a copyright takedown of remaining on screen with a film or something. That little inset window might be enough to defeat the auto checkers, or it might just say content belongs to DreamWorks, banned worldwide, or whatever it is. Anyway, there's just a few points you can make about these movie channels that have existed historically, since there was a channel called Sky Movies, and then there was the Movie Channel, and then shortly after that, in the 90s, there was Sky Movies Gold. Apparently Sky Movies, or was it just the Movie Channel, which was under BSB at the time, before it merged with Sky, British Satellite Broadcasting, actually went out free to air. And but when it became subscription, the premise was pretty simple, really. You can get first run Hollywood movies before normal TV if you pay a bit of a premium. And it's a bit more on top of your normal Sky subscription that would give you the likes of Sky One, now Showcase, what a great name, and UK Gold and so on. And it could sit alongside Sky Sports. So the idea of these channels is to feel fairly luxurious and to get first run movies. And they face quite a few threats now. Obviously that Netflix competes for these movies, Amazon does. There's also the streaming platforms that are increasingly owned by the companies themselves, and that only really gives you. So you got Disney Plus is a good example of that, and that really only gives, say, the owners, the current owners of Sky, which are nothing to do with Murdoch anymore. So you'd be happy about that, particularly if you're in Liverpool. And it's Comcast, Universal, and NBC, which are like conglomerates from the US. They own it all the way through now, and so they have quite a few program rights and movie rights. I think the point of this as a sort of rant video is that the movie channels aren't very exciting, and I actually thought they were good at one point. I particularly liked the Sky Premier era. Now they rebranded as Sky Premier, Moviemax, and Cinema shortly before the launch of Sky Digital in 1998. I think it might have been 1997 that they rebranded as that, and there were only three channels. One was very simple. Premier was all about the first run big films from Hollywood. Moviemax was kind of, slightly more interesting choices, B movies, horror, that's like, that could encompass indie, horror, sort of the second choice. And that worked quite well in that way. And then Sky Cinema was the rebrand of Movies Gold, and it obviously shows classics. So to take us a little bit further through the history, Sky Digital had the luxurious choice of increasing the number of these channels from 3 screens to 12 when that launched in 1998 towards the end of the year. And it was a very, very simple way they did this. They had Sky Premier 2, 3 and 4 at first, so the same choices as on Sky Premier, but now with 4 different screens. So that felt very luxurious at the time, because you had, first run movies at the time would have included the likes of Men in Black, Titanic, Deep Impact, and you could sort of flick around your brand new Sky Digital subscription, picking from those movies. And Moviemax was increased to 5 screens fairly shortly after the launch of Sky Digital. So that, and then there was also a Sky Cinema 2 to go alongside number 1, giving you 12 channels in all. And I think the main rant now is, as we look at the lineup here in 2021, it's still 12 channels. The only thing that's really improved is that Sky's equivalent of a Netflix, which is the box sets, now carries a Netflix style service for these movies. You can watch anything that Sky's got the rights to on demand, unless you've got My Skybox, which is another video, I would say, because it is actually barred from downloading anything to do with Sky, because it's a second-hand box, and I therefore actually have to make use of the linear channels and record them if I want to watch anything, which is not the position that most people will be in. So I think my first point would be is that there are only 12 channels. And the only thing that's really improved is the on-demand movies. I mean, it's a good improvement. So let's see. Let's go a bit more through the history. So they did this, and I felt that the channels were at their strongest when it was Premiere 1 to 4. Then there was Premiere Widescreen, because wow, having a channel devoted to widescreen was a novelty at the time. Everything was actually, 4 to 3 boxed, even at the launch of Sky Digital. And then widescreen became the norm, but there was actually a special channel for it at the time called Premiere Widescreen. And then there was Moviemax 1 to 5 and Cinema 1 and 2. But after, I think it was 2002, they decided to just go and scrap this and just go with Sky Movies 1 to 10, right like that, which made it pretty bland doing that. And I forget exactly how long this lasted for. It was a few years. They had this Movies 1 to 10, scrapping the Premiere, Moviemax and Cinema brands. And then I think it might have been around 2007, which would have been around the sort of time that Sky HD was coming in, which is when they actually went to what they've stuck with right through until today, which is genres, which they've also done to the Sky Sports channels recently. I mean, we had the Sky Sports 1 to 5, but now we've got different sports, which pretty much nails them down into one position. If they lose the rights to too much golf or whatever, they are not going to have an easy time having gone to genre channels, are they? Whereas it was Sports 1 to 5, well, tractor pulling could have been given a slot on Sports 4. Actually, that's kind of a problem with the Sky Movies channels as well. These genre channels have always felt a bit awkward. It seems like a natural step, but they have always felt a bit awkward because you can't always narrow a movie down so easily just to the genre it is. Some things aren't naturally just a comedy. Sometimes things are a drama, but that's not the main problem with it. So one thing that I'm not into is that it's stuck with 12 channels. I heard somewhere, and this was many years ago, that they had the rights to create up to 35 linear channels, and they've never ever gone that far. But I think they could at least have expanded to 20 by now, despite the on-demand library. The other complaint, and I can't be the only one that is bothered about it, is that they don't stick to these genres. They keep renaming channels for temporary rebrands, and it's not very appealing. So, for example, right now they've got this Feel Good. They've had channels flip over to just showing Tom Cruise films, for example, Will Smith. They'll change it over at Halloween. So you can't sort of get used to a channel. So if you like Family here has gone many times. Drama has flipped between sort of being drama and romance. Sci-fi horrors come and gone. And then you've got hits that there's been 5-star movies. So really, there's no continuity to it anymore. It just feels sloppy and it just feels all over the place. It's not been helped by losing the Disney films. They used to have a Disney screen, and I think they've decided to have an animation channel as a sort of replacement to it. And then they briefly had 5-star movies. So I just think that they need to have more consistency with these channel names and just keep them there. I actually think the decade screens are a great idea. They've temporarily come and gone. 80s and 90s screens. It would actually make up for the fact that there's actually a lot of classic movies within this instead of first-run movies, which again would be another complaint. You are paying a premium price even if you're on offer, and they are showing the sort of films that show up on the free-to-air channels, and they seem to have as many, if not more, of those than they do first-run films. I mean, that's kind of a Hollywood thing. It's probably got worse during the pandemic. It's definitely got worse because of the splitting off of content into streaming services, but it really does, not create a premium sort of luxurious feeling around the movies channels, which I think at their strongest point it was like we were getting the biggest movies before they were out on ordinary telly, etc., and that gave you that feeling around the sort of the first years of Sky Digital, of that if you wanted to watch these movie channels in the evening particularly, there would be something good on, and you don't even now really get that feeling. Again, I could just show you, without really commenting on them. When you see these names come up, how appealed do you feel with this? I mean, you got Mean Girls from 2004 there, still showing. You've got a classic movie in the Greats channel. That's another complaint, that there used to be a dedicated channel, Sky Cinema, and we've not had a proper classic Hollywood channel recently. So Greats keeps coming and going. It doesn't just show the classics. They keep coming and going. I mean, look, Minority Report wouldn't have been there, would it? For example. So it's all over the place. That they could just have a Hollywood classics channel, stick with it. I think they could use up to 20 linear channels to maybe add a couple of the decade screens. Like the permanent 80s channel would be brilliant. 90s and noughties would be good. That's the only temporary rebrand I think I've ever enjoyed on it. Is when you kind of forgive them then for showing things that aren't first run. You think, oh, this is all 80s movies. It makes you feel nostalgic. This is all 90s. Now it's really popular, these channels, in the music video section, which in itself is dwindling compared to how many there used to be. These now channels have been really popular because they show and give people a feeling of nostalgia. They just show the 70s, 80s and 90s and programs and features around it. And this, I think, really would work well for the movies channels as well. I guess another complaint would be that I don't like the Sky Cinema name, possibly because it's kind of their attempt to make it sound more premium again. Wow, you're getting movies that are so exclusive they could be at the cinema. But it's also been the brand that they've used for when they changed over from Movies Gold to indicate Hollywood history and classics, and now it's awkwardly been bludgeoned into place as the name for the entire Sky Movies package and section. I don't like it. I think Sky Movies was a classic name, and I prefer the channels being called Sky Movies Great, Sky Movies Animation, Sky Movies Family. I think that really does work better. It feels awkward to say, Back to the Future Part 2's on Sky Cinema Family later. Can't wait to watch Outlander on Sky Cinema Action. So they've just stuck at 12 constantly. They're not interested in expanding it. When they lost the Disney screen, they also brought back the Premiere Plus One, which I'm normally quite a fan of plus 1 hour channels, just because and they have been throughout. They've appeared with digital TV, and they give you the chance to watch something different. When you're flipping through channels, you've got the chance to watch something else immediately in your casual viewing. But with this Premiere Plus One, I mean, it's in SD, whilst the rest in HD. Well, that's one thing they have got right. They used to try and a few years ago, they used to try and force you to pay for the HD add-on to get the movie channels in HD, and I felt it was particularly pointless to be restricted to SD on the movie channels. And they realised that wasn't really appealing or actually incentivising for many people to subscribe if they had to pay that on top, and so they actually did make the HD options for these channels standard. That's what you get now. So with that in mind, why do they want to have a Premiere Plus 1 hour in SD? Who's going to choose it? You can just set a recording for a film that might be on Premiere. Premiere is another thing in my rant, I'm afraid, because the idea of it is that it's going to show the first run films on there and nothing else, which is really good. But they've always done this sort of the same sort of strategy they've done on Sky Box Office, where they will show the same few films every week at the same time. So it's not really like a linear channel you can dip in and out of. It's just the place where they go. And I actually feel it might work better as a channel which just mixes up the output but sticks to first run. So you wouldn't need a +1 hour because you could just set a recording of a movie on it in HD. So what is the point of that? As well as the fact that you could do that for any movie that they're stripping across the whole week. Look at this, Tom and Jerry from 2021. They don't half keep rehashing Tom and Jerry, don't they? If I want to watch that, if you've got a proper box, not like mine, you could download it. You could set a recording for it. So why is it stripped at the same time? Why not create, a linear channel experience where if you're just sort of flicking around channels, you go to Sky Premiere, it's just got a mix of different films on at different times. There's just no point to it really. So I think so really, to summarise it, I'd have more channels, up to 20, just to maybe I'd make some. I'd actually, what I would do is I would have some of these temporary rebrands. I would stick on maybe a couple of their own channels up the guide a bit, say in the 310s if they were up to 20, and I would stick with the consistency of things like family and comedy, drama, etc. I forget what Feel Good even used to be at 302. It just changes that much what that is. I just don't see how anyone, the very loose ideas they've got for changing these channels is mostly ridiculous. They've had superheroes, haven't they? They've just had so many things. Maybe I would even have Premiere 1, 2 to 4 again, and then some of these genres at least, because first run. I think first run films need to be sort of marked out a bit more. And another thing that makes these channels a mess as they are these days is that the first run movies are all that they do have are mixed in with classic things that could be from earlier in the 10s, right back through the noughties, 90s, 80s, etc. They're just all in together on these genre channels, which I think diminishes the premium feeling. You do get people who write on the likes of Digital Spy forums, etc., that they just think it's a load of stuff that they've seen before, and so why would they add the movie channels to their package? So I think it needs better organisation there. And again, it is kind of competing with all these other services, and maybe it won't last forever. Maybe it actually is something that has a sell-by date on it now. This idea of watching linear movie channels like this. But they did want, and I can't be alone in this, they did used to feel like the most exciting thing, unless you're a footy fan or whatever, about Sky Television. The first run Hollywood stuff that, for years though, it's just not felt like that. But it's also because Hollywood itself has changed. Now that would be another big sort of video rant itself, which loads of people have no doubt done on YouTube about the sort of films that Hollywood makes that Sky is dependent on anyway, which is which in a nutshell is a lot more remakes that seem weaker than the originals, an over-reliance on things like superhero films and some of the genuine creativity and originality that we still saw a lot of in the late 90s. It was actually a great era for films. I mean, The Truman Show has just come up on the list there. That was an example of something that was a very creative Hollywood idea. This character who doesn't realise he actually lives in like a soap opera. You don't have many films that are coming out, mainstream films these days, where you think, wow, that was really good. So that again would make you wonder what the point in subscribing to something that shows Hollywood first run movies is necessarily. The quality has sort of dropped anyway. Sky do make some of their own films actually, but hardly any of those have really been ones that have really made a big impact and got people sort of going after it and wanting to watch it. And it's kind of like a little bit of a supplementary thing, a little bit of a what would you call it, a sort of token thing, although it's always positive to see something new being made in the UK, in Britain, like that. But they do exist. Hardly anyone would realise they exist. So there you go. So those really are my thoughts on the movie channels. I mean, just a couple of final thoughts. Film 4 was at its best as a channel when it first launched as a subscription channel that was extra. You had to pay extra for it on Digital and Sky Digital, but it actually had some edgy films, and it was particularly luxurious, I felt, when it had Film 4 World and Extreme. Some of the edgy stuff that got aired, the interesting stuff, and it would seem like it was good news when Film 4 went free to air, which this HD one is not, by the way. That's part of the Sky package, but basically it's like it's just a load of Hollywood films, which I kind of only want to see on the Sky channels. I kind of want Film 4 to be showing the more challenging and different films, or what's the point of it? It's just like, Radio City or Heart Radio plays the latest chart music, sort of thing. Film 4, the whole thing has creative and independent roots, and the actual concept of Film 4 originally was to make things like Train Spotting, wasn't it? And now, the channel that spawned from it has just become this Hollywood menu, mostly. And you might occasionally get that. There's just, I don't think they've got enough going on in British film to actually make this channel stand out. So really, Film 4 is very disappointing. And then you've got Turner Classic Movies, which has rather stupidly put the title Movies on top of it in a recent sort of refresh. It's it stands for Turner Classic Movies. I did say in the other video that TCM HD has gone. I mean, who wants to, in 2021, watch a channel that is now restricted to SD when we didn't have to put up with that? Some fairly more modern films. Well, this is showing age really, because I really like that one from '97. It was the Sky Premiere material back then, in amongst the classics that they show. But that's a real downgrade there. So you got +1, and these are all free to air, and they could be actually quite good. But this Movies 24, which does not care about showing Christmas films in the middle of summer, and always rebrands to itself to Christmas 24 in October, of course, because when else, is still part of your diminishing Sky package. As it's not the point of this video, but just because they've turned up on the screen, this row here from MTV Music, yes, MTV does stand for Music Television, is what's left of the pay music channels on your Sky subscription. Those MTV branded channels. There's only 4 of them now. They got rid of MTV Rocks and MTV Dance, it was known as Club MTV at alternate times, and the rest of those channels there are all free to air, no Sky card needed. So there you go. That's what I think of Sky Movies, and the only reason I have it is because I'm on an offer, and no, I'm not paying what they would really want you to pay for it, and of course I'm not.